So today, we're tackling a question that honestly comes up all the time on work sites everywhere. Can someone with a vision or hearing impairment legally and safely operate a forklift?
Okay, so let's just dive right in. And the short answer? Well, it's kind of complicated. It's not a simple yes or no. Why? Because the real answer is all about balancing two major and sometimes competing sets of federal rules. See, on one hand, you've got OSHA, that's the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and their whole world revolves around keeping everyone safe on the job. But on the other hand, you have the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and its job is to make sure workers are protected from discrimination.
And this right here, this really gets to the heart of the issue. You can see the tension, right? OSHA is laser-focused on one thing. Can you operate that machine safely? It's all about performance. But the ADA, it's all about fairness. It says employers have to look for reasonable ways to help people do the job. So you've got this classic push and pull between performance and protection, and somehow they have to work together.
So, let's talk about OSHA. What's their actual rule on this? The answer might genuinely surprise you. You know, there's this common myth that OSHA has some big, scary checklist of medical conditions that just automatically boots you from ever driving a forklift, but that's just not how it works. And here's the absolute key takeaway. OSHA does not have a list of banned conditions. They don't care about a medical label on a piece of paper. Their entire focus, their only focus, is on one question. Can this person do the job safely and capably? It's all about performance, not the diagnosis.
Okay, so what does OSHA care about then? Well, this slide breaks it down perfectly. The questions they ask aren't about a diagnosis at all. They're super practical. Can you spot a pedestrian walking by? Can you hear or see a warning signal? Can you pass the hands-on driving test? See, if an operator can prove they can do these things, the impairment itself doesn't automatically knock them out of the running.
All right, so if OSHA isn't making a blanket ban, where does that leave us? Well, it shifts the focus right onto the employer. Before a manager can just say, nope, sorry, you can't do this job, the ADA legally requires them to explore reasonable accommodations. They have to try to find ways to help that person do the job safely. Okay, so let's start with vision. We're going to break this down a bit. And when we talk about vision impairments, this covers a really wide range, right? It could be something as simple as needing corrective lenses, or it could be something more complex that affects, say, depth perception or your peripheral vision.
And this is where the rubber really meets the road. Let's say someone has what's called tunnel vision. A perfectly reasonable accommodation might be adding some of those convex mirrors at busy intersections, or maybe even painting bright, clear visual guides on the floor. Or what about someone with night blindness? Well, maybe just improving the lighting in a few dim aisles could completely solve the problem. You see, it's all about finding a solution, not just staring at the limitation.
All right, let's flip to the other side of the coin now, hearing. What about accommodations for operators who are deaf or hard of hearing? This is another area where, honestly, people make a lot of assumptions.
Think about it. Most warehouses are already incredibly loud places. A lot of operators are wearing hearing protection anyway, right? So in a lot of situations, using visual signals like flashing strobe lights on the forklifts can actually be more effective than a beeping alarm for everyone in the building, not just for the operator with a hearing impairment. So this all leads to a really critical question. How should an employer actually make the final call? The one thing they absolutely can't do is have a blanket policy like, sorry, we don't hire anyone with hearing loss. Nope. It has to be an individualized process based on the specific person and the specific job.
And here's the process they have to follow. First, you've got to evaluate the person's actual ability. We're talking a real hands-on driving test. See what they can do. Second, you have to seriously consider if there are any accommodations that could make the job safe. And third, whatever you decide, yes or no, it has to be documented. This is huge because it protects both the worker and the company. Now, of course, we have to be realistic here. There are definitely situations where even after you've explored every possible accommodation, operating a forklift just isn't going to be safe. Not for that individual and not for the people around them.
And this is where that line has to be drawn. I mean, if an operator's depth perception is so off that they're constantly misjudging distances when they're lifting a heavy load, that's a problem. Or if they genuinely cannot detect pedestrians, even with extra mirrors and bright floor markings, well, that's a direct threat to safety. At the end of the day, safety has to be the final word.
But check this out. Even then, it's not necessarily the end of the line. And this is a really important part of the ADA that people often forget. If operating a forklift is officially ruled out, the employer should then consider if that employee can be reassigned to another valuable role in the company.
Just think about it.
An experienced warehouse worker knows so much. They have a ton of valuable knowledge about the products, the layout, the whole operation. They could be a fantastic inventory clerk, or work in quality control, or maybe coordinate shipping and receiving. The goal here is to keep their skills and experience in the company. You're just shifting them away from operating heavy machinery.
So let's bring it all home. What's the biggest takeaway from all of this? It's this. A vision or hearing impairment only becomes a problem when it prevents the operator from being safe, not just because the impairment exists. The final question should never be, what's on your medical chart? It should always be, can this person, in this specific environment, with these tools, do the job safely? It's all about ability, not the label.